This is Special Prosecutor Larry Klayman.
I'm the only lawyer ever to obtain a court ruling that a president of the United States committed a crime.
For truth. For competition.
As a young lawyer, I helped break up AT&T. That's why you have all your cell phones today.
For sovereignty. For the Republic.
I'm the guy who, at Judicial Watch, which I founded, uncovered the Chinagate scandal. Millions of dollars going to the Clinton campaign, corrupting our political system.
For the privacy of citizens.
And I'm the only guy to have enjoined the National Security Agency from mass surveillance on hundreds of millions of Americans.
Tearing it up.
I'm the son of meatpackers in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. I know how to slice and dice.
Bringing it back.
We're going to take this country apart and put it back together again in the way envisioned by our founding fathers.
It's not just talk.
We're not just regurgitating news stories. Larry Klayman, special prosecutor, is making the news.
And now, here's Larry.
Welcome to this week's edition of Special Prosecutor with Larry Klayman. As usual, a ton of news. I'll tell you, it's just flowing in terms of the corruption at the FBI and my former alma mater, the Department of Justice. Joining us today again is Franklin Raff, that very talented talk show host, my co-host. And he's going to be contributing to this report because he gives a neutral perspective. I mean, I'm down here in the trenches. I'll tell you something. The stench is just unbelievable. And let me tell you something about my experience with the Justice Department and the FBI. I was a young lawyer. And, of course, I was very idealistic. I thought working for the Justice Department as a prosecutor or defense lawyer was like, at the time, going to Harvard. Of course, I didn't want to go to a liberal school in any event. I went to Duke University, which has become, unfortunately, the Berkeley of the South in the last several years. But I want to play you a clip immediately of the new FBI Director, Christopher Wray, who's answering questions yesterday at the House Judiciary Committee about the corruption at the FBI and the comments by the president, which are quite correct, that the FBI is in tatters. And, of course, the FBI is the flip side of the coin of the Department of Justice. It's part of the Department of Justice. It's overseen by Attorney General Jeff Sessions, who's buried his head in the sand to all of this corruption concerning Robert Mueller, concerning a lot of other things that are related to Hillary Clinton scandals and whatever. And I want to play this clip right now because it tells you where we are. This is a choreographed response by the current director of the FBI. Sounds like a child, and frankly, he's really not up to the task. So, Franklin, play that clip for us.
Is the FBI's reputation in tatters?
Congressman, there is no shortage of opinions out there. What I can tell you is that the FBI that I see is tens of thousands of agents and analysts and staff working their tails off to keep Americans safe from the next terrorist attack, gang violence, child predators, spies from Russia, China, North Korea, and Iran. The FBI that I see is tens of thousands of brave men and women who are working as hard as they can to keep people that they will never know safe from harm. The FBI that I see is people, decent people, committed to the highest principles of integrity and professionalism and respect. The FBI that I see is respected and appreciated by our partners in federal, state, and local law enforcement, in the intelligence community, by our foreign counterparts, both law enforcement and national security, in something like 200 countries around the globe. That's the FBI that I see.
Well, I'll tell you something. This was choreographed, obviously. He had memorized that. In fact, that was the high point of his testimony, because after that he dissembled completely. He could barely answer questions. He was stuttering. He's not someone who really has a lot of gravitas and is in control of this agency right now. And while he cannot be blamed for standing up for his fellow agents, because there are a lot of good FBI agents, I've represented them, and most of the rank and file are quite honest. But the president's right. The people at the top are highly corrupt. They're highly politicized. As Newt Gingrich and other studies have shown, about 97% of the people at the Department of Justice, mostly the lawyers, a lot of the FBI agents, donated to Hillary Clinton, donated to Barack Obama. They're part of this deep state. They've been there forever. And I'm going to bring Franklin in to give me his thoughts. But let me lay this out really quickly here. We have a court case which we filed. It was assigned to Judge Amy Berman Jackson to force an investigation by the Office of Professional Responsibility and the Inspector General of the Justice Department into FBI misconduct and also misconduct by the Department of Justice itself with regard to Robert Mueller. And, of course, Mueller is part of the Department of Justice. His special counsel investigation is under the authority of the Deputy Attorney General who appointed him, an Obama holdover by the name of Rod Rosenstein, who's highly corrupt as well. And, of course, we now see this witch hunt that is resulting by Robert Mueller. And we filed a lawsuit because we asked these two agencies of the Department of Justice to investigate illegal grand jury leaks by Mueller, which are attempting to destroy not just the president, but everybody around him, whether it's Paul Manafort, whether it's Michael Flynn, anyone, because the purpose here is to damage the president and bring down his presidency. I take no position on the guilt or innocence of any of the people that have been indicted, but I do take issue with smearing them before they have a chance to make their defense in court before a jury of their peers. And Mueller doesn't care about that. He continues to leak, and that is criminal. Mueller himself and the people around him, these conflicted Hillary Clinton, Obama, deep state prosecutors, need to be investigated and they need to be indicted. So I brought a lawsuit to force that, and it was assigned to this judge, Amy Berman Jackson, who I've just also moved to disqualify because she's also a Democratic partisan. And you can read about it at freedomwatchusa.org. It's also going to be out in the media. And this is one aspect of what we're doing. And just recently, we found a report yesterday that an individual by the name of Bruce Orr, that's spelled O-H-R, currently the Associate Deputy Attorney General and Director of the Organized Crime Task Force. Of course, currently, I mean as of yesterday, because he was demoted. They removed that title. Not coincidentally, 17 years ago, I traveled to Brazil with Bruce Orr. He was head of the crime task force. He was investigating Hillary Clinton's accepting bribes, alleged bribes, with regard to the Hollywood tribute to Bill Clinton, which raised $2 million in hard campaign contributions in terms of supporting with hard money contributions her Senate campaign. You remember that when Dan Warwick got up and Barbara Streisand were there, and they were all extolling the virtues of Bill Clinton in his last days in office, singing songs, carrying on the Hollywood left. Well, that was to raise money for Hillary Clinton's campaign. And my client, Peter Paul, came to us and told us about this, and we agreed to represent him because he was being investigated criminally, later was indicted, in exchange for him providing information about the Clintons. We had Hillary Clinton dead to rights. We had Bill Clinton dead to rights. We had thank you notes. It was hard money contributions. Peter understood what was going on, and we sought to negotiate a cooperation agreement with Bruce Orr and his crime task force. He traveled down to Brazil, where Peter was then in prison because the Justice Department was trying to lock him up improperly, to shut him up at that time. And that was the Republican administration of Attorney General John Ashcroft. It shows you how the two parties work together. They cover for themselves because by the grace of God, there go I. And that's what happened during the Bush years. It's not happening with Trump, but he's not in control of his department. So Bruce Orr rears his ugly head, and it turns out that recent reports are that he met with Christopher Steele, that discredited British spy, and also Glenn Simpson, who owns Fusion GPS, which were investigated by Mueller when Mueller was FBI director, but it was covered up. And this is what gave rise to the dossier, which ultimately smeared Trump in terms of his activities in Russia, claimed he was engaging in activities with prostitutes and God knows what else. It was all made up, and it what in part triggered this special counsel investigation of Mueller. So Bruce Orr covered that investigation up of Hillary Clinton 17 years ago. You know who got indicted? Hillary Clinton's campaign finance director, David Rosen. And it was tried in Los Angeles. Hillary went off scot-free for taking these illegal campaign contributions. They indicted her campaign finance chairman, David Rosen, and he later was acquitted because the jury couldn't figure it out. Why wasn't Hillary indicted, and why are they holding this middle-level guy out to dry? They were pretty smart. So this is Bruce Orr, and this is what's been going on with Mueller, and it's breaking news. Now, we brought this case to force an investigation into Mueller. We brought this case to get justice. We brought this case to remove him. So please go to our website at freedomwatchusa.org, sign our petition, because we need your support, financial and otherwise, to carry this on, because no one else is doing this. My former public interest group, Judicial Watch, gets some documents, but from that point, all they do is go on Fox News and other places. We're actually in the courts trying to get justice. I'm doing today what I used to do at Judicial Watch. We need your strong support. Franklin, give me your thoughts on this, because, see, this is breaking news, and there's more to talk about yet.
Well, it just makes it that much more important, Larry, that that Freedom Watch is there, especially at a time in which we're evidently bragging about how the FBI is defending us from the North Koreans, when, of course, as you know, you're talking about these things that rear their ugly head, lax security controls, millions of dollars for the military and intelligence services of at least one hostile foreign power, supercomputers and guidance systems, basically that Clinton Inc. sold, that are now the reason North Korea is about to possibly start World War III.
Well, that's true. They do get active in that area. But what is of immediate concern, in addition to North Korea, and you're absolutely right, Franklin, is the fact that they've covered up these investigations of the Clintons. They've covered up investigations of Mueller. They've covered up other investigations that we're going to get into in the second segment. And they're doing that in conjunction with an attorney general appointed by the president, Jeff Sessions, who's buried his head in the sand because he himself is the subject of the Mueller grand jury investigation. He doesn't want to rock the boat, so he's nowhere to be found. There's no leadership at the Justice Department and at the FBI, and that's why we have to go into court to force an investigation by OPR and the Inspector General, and to ultimately have Mueller removed. The president, frankly, is not being well represented by his lawyers. His lawyers are rolling over. They're wishing for the best. They're in bed with Mueller. I mean, they all have competing interests. They have other clients that they have to deal with the Justice Department and Mueller. And that's why you need a Freedom Watch that does it clearly. Go to freedomwatchusa.org, contribute to our cause, sign our petition. We're the only game in town. We are your Justice Department. We'll be right back.
Dangerous.
I don't care. Use the court and the law.
Lethal.
This is bad.
Special prosecutor.
Very bad.
Larry Klayman.
If you'd like to support Freedom Watch and this radio show, go to freedomwatchusa.org.
Let me also tell you about what the Justice Department and FBI have not done and what they've covered up. And we're going to talk about this in the final segment, and we're going to talk about it in the next segment, but that's Clive and Bundy. They have been caught red-handed, shredding documents, hiding evidence, not producing exculpatory Brady material in the Bundy prosecution in Nevada. And I have also asked the Inspector General and the Office of Professional Responsibility to investigate this prosecutorial misconduct. We have a hearing on December 19th before Judge Rudolph Contreras to force them to do this and to order the end of this investigation because it's been fatally tainted with destruction of evidence. Prosecutorial misconduct is one basis to dismiss the indictment. And this is part and parcel to what's been going on with Robert Mueller, with what's been going on with the investigations he sat on with Comey, Fusion GPS, Uranium One, and everything else. And the president is absolutely right. The higher-ups at the FBI have become corrupt. It's a cesspool. The higher-ups at the Justice Department are either corrupt or inert, and they do nothing. And without a Justice Department, we're left defenseless. And that's why what we do at Freedom Watch is so important, because we are your Justice Department. You know, I don't worry about consequences. I do what I think is right. I do believe that God is on our side, the American people, and that in the end we will prevail. But this corruption has been going on for years. Now, let me tell you about something else, and that's Dennis Montgomery. Years ago, about 3 years ago, we went to James Comey and we went to his general counsel to get an investigation of the illegal surveillance that's being conducted by, you guessed it, the FBI, the National Security Agency, the CIA, and the Director of National Intelligence. Dennis turned over 600 million pages of information on 47 hard drives. It implicates Comey. It implicates Mueller. It implicates others in the intelligence agencies like John Brennan, who was director of the CIA. It implicates James Clapper, who Dennis worked closely with, in surveilling millions of people, hundreds of millions of people in this country, specifically Supreme Court justices, including the Chief Justice himself, 156 judges, Donald Trump when he was a businessman, even yours truly. Anybody who the government thought was a threat to them in any way, they would surveil. Now, this was buried by Comey. It was buried by everybody. It was buried by the general counsel, James Baker, who not coincidentally was reported to be recently under criminal investigation for leaks. These people are nowhere to be found. This concerns the American people. We have an Orwellian police state, a gulag, which is sitting on top of us, so we can't move. We can't talk to anyone without fear that we're being surveilled. And, of course, we know what happened with Trump. We know what happened with Manafort, wiretaps on the Trump Tower, everything else. The president was right. He was being wiretapped. And this is another investigation that has been buried. So we'll be filing another lawsuit to force this investigation, which we've asked for, shortly. So, Franklin, I know that I'm taking up all the time here, but this thing's out of control. And we have a Justice Department who is our enemy, not on our side.
I was so shocked to learn what Dennis Montgomery knew and these revelations. And of course, you should take up all the time. This is a Freedom Watch show. This is the Larry Klayman show. I'm just as a research assistant, but I'd really like to know where you think, if you will look in your crystal ball, this will go, because it seems to me, and maybe I'm wrong, is Dennis Montgomery being deep-sixed because he's like the man who knows too much? It's extraordinary what this man can reveal. Among other things, the fact that the president himself was wiretapped. What do you think?
Well, what I think is that we have a complete cover-up by the Justice Department and the FBI. They don't want to touch the higher-ups. They won't get promoted, these people at the middle level. And, of course, it's an example. Look what happened to Bruce Orr. When it came out, his corruption, he was just removed from Associate Deputy Attorney General. These people are career people. They toe the line of the politicians. They never say boo, you know? In fact, they're yes men. When they're told to say no, they say no. And this is what they do. No to investigating Clinton. No to investigating Mueller. Let the American people be damned. We are part of this intelligentsia in Washington, D.C., and frankly, we could give a damn. So this is what we're up against at Freedom Watch. This is, again, what separates Freedom Watch from Judicial Watch today. It's great to get documents. You can get on Fox News. You can pound your chest. But we're bringing hard-hitting cases. Now, we're dealing with a lot of leftist judges, so we keep punching and fighting. We want to avoid any kind of violence. We want to do it legally. We'll be right back.
And now, 4 words that make corrupt politicians make wee-wee in their little pants.
Transparency and the rule of law will be the touchstones of this president.
But we have to pass the bill so that you can find out what is in it.
Special Prosecutor Larry Klayman.
Be the one who makes our country great again. Go to freedomwatchusa.org and donate.
I want to introduce now a friend of mine, someone who I met out in the Bundy trials in the last few weeks, Representative Dorothy Moon of the Legislative District 8B of Idaho. She's a very fine person. She has a fine husband, Dar, and they are experts on land rights, and she's been fighting for the rights of Westerners and others to retain their land, not have the federal government encroach and take it over. And I want her to explain what she's been doing and why land is so important to the American people, why that's the foundation of this country, and particularly in the West for ranchers and farmers and others, and why we need to fight for that, and how it plays in with what's happening with Cliven Bundy in his trial in Las Vegas. Dorothy, welcome to Special Prosecutor with Larry Klayman.
Oh, Larry, thank you so much for having me on. This is so timely considering what's happening up here in the Salmon Chalice Forest. I just want to bring you up to speed and your listeners that as a new legislator here in Idaho, I was hoping, to work on other issues and matters besides just Forest Service harassment issues that my constituents have been dealing with all year and not the past years before I even came into service, and rather innocuous issues. And I'm just going to give your listeners a couple of examples. One person was picking up some wood that had fallen off of a truck, and he was charged for collecting wood in the forest at $50 a log. It was $300. He had to drive 200 miles to a federal court. He pled out with a misdemeanor and a $75 fine. That's just one of many and a variety of issues, and I know I don't have time, so we'll have to do this later. But at the same time, so here we've got complaint issues. I also found out that the Salmon Chalice Forest was updating their forest plan, which was over 30 years old, which wasn't really followed for the past 30 years. And that's revealed by the mega fires we have, that the fuel and the logging, which has primarily disappeared in our 4.2 million acre forest, has allowed this to happen. So anyway, this update will have future implications affecting my constituents who live here. So when I didn't get any satisfaction from our forest supervisor about my citizen complaints, I decided I had to reach out to Forest Service Chief Tony Took at a national level. And I had sent him the letters. There were about 20 of them from folks in Lemhi and Custer County that were affected by this government overreach. And I know discussions from other forests in the West who have been meeting with the chief. Their biggest issue is the lack of trust with the local forest.
Your question, Dorothy, is very important because you're seeing it out there in Idaho. We've seen it in Utah. The president just gave back a lot of land on national monuments to the American people last week. Bundy, they basically have taken his entire ranch over, 300,000 to 400,000 acres in and around Lake Mead. That was Obama in the last days of his administration, notwithstanding prosecuting him and trying to drive Bundy and his family off the land which they've ranched for 150 years. But this is part of a broader problem, is it not, with regard to the federal government seizing land by these leftist environmental interests and others and pushing Americans off their God-given rights to ranch and to farm and to have some kind of livelihood. And you're a good arbiter of what the land means to people. Can you give us your thoughts on that?
Well, and I guess one of the things that you're right, they are trying to push us off of our land, because at the first public hearing they had, the Forest Service put on a month ago, they had maps up designating more wilderness and more wild and scenic rivers. So where the Salmon River runs through this part of the woods, that is considered wild and scenic. All of the tributaries are not. They're trying to bring every tributary in, which now affects a half mile from the center of those rivers on both sides. So you can see where they're going to try to control and push the people off the land. This is so obvious. And again, like you said, the Bundy situation, it comes right down to it. Having attended the trial with my husband last week, and you were there. You're following it very closely, which is much appreciated. You realize that the Forest Service and the BLM, these folks lie. And it was revealed on the witness stand the week we were there. So sometimes I wonder if they're just working for these objectives without who gets tromped on. And I'm seeing it here, and it's really upsetting. But luckily, this past week, I had 100 people, and that may not sound like a lot, but we're a very rural area, 50 in each one of the counties of Lemhi and Custer, and they are going to take control of this. By law, these plans have got to have input from local governments, the citizens, the users, the folks that use the lands, the ranchers and the loggers and the miners, who have pretty much all been run out. Loggers and miners are gone. Ranchers are right in the crosshairs. And we have got to get a voice, and we have to take our lands back. I want nothing but citizen input on this. And it should be weighted more, too. We've had to deal with these fires. The smoke is horrible half of the year. And it isn't right. And we need to reduce fuel loads. We need to let people go into the woods and cut wood, remove it without fear of being thrown in jail or arrested or cited for some, like I said, innocuous charge.
Well, and the thing here is with the Bundys, I don't know about Idaho, but you had Harry Reid, that corrupt senator who still, frankly, is very powerful in the Democratic Party. He's someone who has, behind the scenes through his son Rory, been trying to sell the land off to reported Chinese environmental interests. Now, undoubtedly, Reid was getting kickbacks. So it's not just a question of individuals trying to claim land for the federal government, federal officials, but usually there are officials behind this that seek to profit in some way. And that's the corruption here. And this is a major scandal on the horizon. I want people on the East Coast to recognize that, because land rights are not in the public domain as much as they are in the West. But, we've all watched Western movies. The land is everything. So, Dorothy, I want to thank you for coming on. We're going to have you and Dar on again in the future, because this is a big issue that the American people need to be educated about. Thank you.
And Larry, thank you for shining a light on this. It is a big issue, and I look forward to coming back again.
God bless you all.
God bless you.
Now, I'm going to pick up here. We're going to pick up here, Franklin, with this issue of land and with Bundy, because this is what's important, and this is what I've come to appreciate being with Cliven now. I've been with him at least 25 times in prison over the last year and 10 months. He's been incarcerated recently. When the judge saw that the Bureau of Land Management, as Dorothy just said, was lying, that they were destroying evidence, so was the FBI. They did surveillance. They held back on exculpatory evidence. It's called Brady material that could help the defense. The judge, I think, felt obliged to finally offer to let the Bundys out of prison. Now, they're in a halfway house. They're still under house arrest, in effect. It's not freedom. And Cliven refused to come out of prison because at the time two of his sons were still there and the other defendants were there. Cliven is a man of tremendous principle, and he says, unless I'm free totally, then I'm not coming out and making Bureau of Land Management, the FBI, or even the court look good, okay? Because I've been kept in here for no reason for a year, 10 months. And this is what we're dealing with now with the Justice Department, these corrupt prosecutors. It's why we're going to this hearing on December 19th before Judge Contreras. And it's why, frankly, we need to do something to stem this, because this out-of-control Justice Department thinks that they are ruling supreme over the American people, and they're not. They're not permitted to do the things that they've been doing. And as a result, that's why you need a Freedom Watch, frankly.
It's just extraordinary to me, Larry Klayman, how we seem to thrive as Americans. We have our heroes. Everybody's a hero. But we thrive in the continued belief that anybody with a badge is worthy of a position of command over our lives, our property, our families, our schools. This new report, just by way of taking some of the hot air out of this idea. Now you have another Bureau of Land Management agent who's accused of some pretty gross ethical violations at the abusing federal law enforcement resources, intimidating BLM staff to keep quiet about his conduct. This was just out of the Burning Man so-called celebration.
Yeah, his name's Dan Love.
Dan Love, yeah, that was just another piece of news. But yet these newsworthy items, just like the exculpatory evidence, right, never seem to make it to the mainstream media. Why is it that? Why does that happen? Why is Cliven Bundy being branded an enemy of the state?
That's very well put. Well, he's being branded an enemy of the state because he stood up. It was peaceful protest. Neither Cliven nor his sons ever brandished any weapons. But when the people around the country saw that the Bureau of Land Management and the FBI were frankly beating the crap out of his family to get them off the land and to take their cattle away from them, their livelihood, they came to Bunkerville. And they themselves had to protect themselves because they saw that Cliven's sister was thrown to the ground viciously, that his dog was kicked and harmed, that cattle were being killed. His two sons, Ammon and Davy, were being tased. And they said, well, okay, we're going to use our Second Amendment rights. And when they came, and they didn't harm the hair on anyone, and they didn't point guns at anyone, they were just in self-defense. Cliven, his sons, and 16 others were indicted because they had the gall to use their Second Amendment and First Amendment rights and stand up to a tyrannical government. And ask yourself the question, let's say you owe the government money. Let's say you owe the IRS money, which Cliven does not. He maintains he does not. That land belongs to Nevada, and we're going to be filing a court case to confirm that. But even if you owe the government money, does that give them the right to bust into your house, to beat the crap out of your family, to kill your cattle, to destroy your livelihood, and to threaten your lives? Their lives were threatened, straight up, by Dan Love and others. So this is what you're dealing with. You can't have that. That's why we fought the American Revolution, and that's why this case is perhaps the most important case I've ever participated in.
Yes, a few things come to mind. I don't know how politically incorrect it is to say Ruby Ridge comes to mind or Waco comes to mind, so I won't bring it to light. But this is all part of the idea that Americans have come to believe that the Second Amendment is for hunting. And that's one thing that comes to mind, right? It's not for hunting. It was never about hunting. And finally, one has to ask oneself, especially after your interview with Dorothy Moon, whose country is it anyway? And what does it mean to be a free citizen in America, in the land of the free? I've lived in socialist countries, Larry, where the IRS have guns. Okay, I'll tell you, for instance, in Canada, they can come into your business and audit you in your place of business. Take your best table at your best restaurant and audit you. For years and years and years they can do this. They have the right to do it, and they enjoy exercising the power. What does it mean to be an American citizen and ostensibly freer?
Because the government has become, for many people, our God. We no longer have Moses. We don't have Jesus. We don't have Yahweh. We don't have the Father. We don't have anybody. The government is your God, and you must obey. And if you do not obey, you will be prosecuted. You will be thrown in prison. You will not be allowed out, even with sufficient bail. You will be destroyed. And that's why go to ClivenBundyDefenseFund.org. Please contribute. I'm going to be sitting out there for many months. It's very costly, and this is a very important case. And I don't think that the country really realizes that yet, because I'm sitting there in court, and on the left side are all these leftist journalists. Southern Poverty Law Center. You got people from the Oregonian. I mean, they're foaming at the mouth, waiting for Cliven and his family to be destroyed, because, you see, the left worships the government, and Cliven stood up for the government with the peaceful protesters. And that's why this case is so important. So go to ClivenBundyDefenseFund.org. Contribute to our cause, and go to freedomwatchusa.org, because we need to take on the forces of Robert Mueller and those corrupt officials in the Justice Department. This is something that we need to do as the Americans. We need to try it peacefully. I've never advocated violence, but I'm afraid that all heck's going to break loose unless we take strong action in the courts. And, of course, there are a lot of leftist judges. Occasionally we get somebody who will put his foot down. Occasionally there's someone with integrity, but we need to keep trying. We have no choice. So go to ClivenBundyDefenseFund.org, FreedomWatchUSA.org. Please contribute to our cause and join our case. We'll be back.
Before he was a trial lawyer, he sliced him and diced him.
People used to ask me, Larry, what caused you to start Judicial Watch and now Freedom Watch, given the powerful forces in this country that put you at risk?
In a meat packing plant.
I'm the son of meat packers in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. I know how to slice and dice.
A very special prosecutor, Larry Klayman.
If you'd like to support Freedom Watch and this radio show, go to freedomwatchusa.org.
Franklin, I want to talk about your thoughts, because you are a very perceptive person, and you're able to understand what's going on. And the American people are starting to understand much more and more, but they need to understand even more fully. That's why we have this show, is to educate. And as we say at the outset, we just don't regurgitate the news, we make the news. So I'm trying to put it in context of what Freedom Watch has been doing. And of course, people can go to freedomwatchusa.org and learn more and sign up our petition to get rid of Mueller and to get our newsletters and things like that. But I want to get your thoughts.
I've been really enjoying all of the groping, raping, progressive feminists in power. When they're not groping and raping, they're always busy selling human baby part tissues. But the story that is most recent this week for me that I really wanted to learn from you, your take, was this fellow Peter Strzok, who is the guy who switched the language from Comey. Remember when Comey let Hillary off the hook and he said, well, it was extremely careless. But evidently the original wording, which had legal implications that you as an attorney would understand, was grossly negligent. And I would be very interested to know your take on what that means, that they changed at the last minute. They did some optics reviewing and decided to call Hillary's wicked security lapse of, 50,000 highly classified and secret and top secret emails. Of course, we know the difference, right? The news media tend to say, they're all classified. No, secret is not classified, right? And what does that mean, that they changed the language from grossly negligent, which to me seems to have a legal implication, to extremely careless?
Well, in the broader context, of course, they were trying to take Hillary out of criminal prosecution because the misuse of classified information is a crime if it's done in a grossly negligent way. So they were trying to reduce the standard there and say, well, she wasn't grossly negligent. It was just she was extremely careless. But this is part of a bigger issue. And it's the fact that I've known about all of this for years. I toot my horn sometimes because you have to, but no one understands Washington better than I do. There were two other people who understood it, but they're both dead right now. One was William Safire, the great journalist for the New York Times who had worked in the Nixon administration as a speechwriter, and Robert Novak, another investigative journalist. He used to be with Evans and Novak, then he had his own. But, the problem here is that you got Congress up there pounding their chest, holding these hearings. They never do anything other than the hearings. Occasionally they try to hold someone in contempt. They don't follow up in court. Frankly, they don't do squat. Okay, and then you've got these public interest groups like my former group that just gets documents, and that's about it. Now, what do you do after that? You try to bring about justice as best you can. But this is not new. The corruption, you can read about it in my book, Whores, Why and How I Came to Fight the Establishment. I'm going to write a new book soon called Whores 2, They're Back. So, years ago, the police department of Washington, D.C. herded all the prostitutes on 14th Street across the 14th Street Bridge into Virginia. They basically said, Virginia, you deal with them. You know what happened? They came back over the 14th Street Bridge. But the real problem are not the women prostitutes or male prostitutes in Washington, D.C. They actually perform a service. The real problem is the political elite and the media elite who are so corrupt that want to destroy this country because they're cashing in, stuffing money into their pockets. And I'm not just talking about Democrats. I'm talking about Republicans like Paul Ryan, who just told Trent Franks to leave on the sex abuse scandal because he asked a couple people in his office that they might be surrogates. I mean, it's out of control. And it's a witch hunt. It's a lynching. And they're getting involved in things that divert the attention from the inherent rot in our justice system, whether it's the Justice Department, whether it's the FBI, whether it's these leftist judges on the bench, and also some on the right, too, who roll over for the political elite, whether it's the legislature that basically just tries to get on the cable news network so they can get reelected and get more donations. Our country is on the brink of extinction, and that's why we have to do anything we can legally to try to bring it back.
Individual liberty and the rule of law seem to me to be what Freedom Watch really is about. Bundy, these things all come together, don't they?
They do, and that's why people have to go to our website and contribute to our cause at freedomwatchusa.org. We'll be back next week with more horror stories.